Welcome, and thank you for joining the Sal Collection for the final reading of our fall virtual reading series. I am Kristen Lloyd, the director of the collection. First, I want to thank the Texas Tech Humanities Center and its director, Dr. Michael Borshuk, for sponsoring the series this semester. Their support has allowed us to host three fantastic authors. Stacy, Deborah, and Ibe work in different forms, but they are all connected through their explorations of place, home, and community. And tonight, we are joined by Ibe Liebenberg, who will read from his Sal Emerging Writers Prize award-winning Birds at Night. So we're winding down this semester, but we still have another event next week on the 12th. We'll host a lecture by Dr. Laura Walls at the Museum of Texas Tech. Dr. Walls will share her latest research on her biography of Barry Lopez, and I can drop that information in the chat if you're here in Lubbock and you want to go. So that's all the housekeeping, and I'm going to turn things over to Tony Jensen, our lovely moderator. Please mute your microphones and turn on your cameras if you will. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. It's so good to see all of you. I know a good many of the names and faces so far, so welcome everyone. I have the real true pleasure of introducing Ibe Liebenberg to you all and then Q&Aing with him a little after he reads. I've heard Ibe read many times at Institute of American Indian Arts and once also out in California at a Writing by Writers workshop. And so some of these poems are familiar to me from this collection and some are less familiar, but I'm really excited by this new book and the possibilities going forward for Ibe's dual life as firefighter and writer, but especially the writer part, right? Moving into the future. So Ibe Liebenberg is a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation. He lives in Chico, California, and works as a firefighter and a lecturer at Chico State University. He's a recent graduate of the MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts in both poetry and fiction, which is pretty unusual to do both, and really exciting too for the potentials going forward for fiction as well as poetry. He's been published in Poetry Magazine, the Three Penny Review, Ecotone, North American Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, Sugar House Review, American Journal of Poetry, and Salamander Magazine. Finalist of the James Welch Poetry Contest, winner of the Tribal College Journal's Creative Writing Contest in both fiction and poetry, and now winner also of the Sowell Emerging Writers Prize for Poetry for his new collection, Birds at Night. And what I would say before he starts about Birds at Night is that this book merges so many themes and places and images in lines that are really tight and always either pausing in just the right way in the moment or moving forward at kind of a rapid velocity. And so pacing and speed and image are things I think his fiction and his poetry share that make both really compelling. And so without further talking from me, let's please welcome Ibe Liebenberg.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Tony, for the introduction, and Kristen for hosting this. Yeah, I just want to say that I'm glad you mentioned that about these different themes and interconnecting, because that was the most difficult part for me to merge this into a collection and make it cohesive. And I almost got to the point where, I thought about doing 3 separate chapbooks and, dividing each theme. And then I just did the old thing where you set it all up on a boardroom table, and I just moved them around and tried to make them make sense. And, it finally came together. But so I want to read some of these poems. And I think one of the first ones that was written for this was the title piece, Birds at Night. And there's 2 of them in the collection. But the first one was one of the first ones I'd written, and it was, I'll try to it's really difficult because when you're submitting work and this work is being, looked at, there, a lot of times there's no context to it. And it's amazing that any of it ever gets picked up, with some of it so abstract. And this first one, the very first Birds at Night, was one of those moments for me that was just, it hit me. And the next poem I'll read after that will kind of clear up some of those themes. But Birds at Night. Overhead, under tired silhouettes, fighting through the almost dark, wings touching black, the blur between stars disappears. The sound of labor and pain against the earth and sky not caring. And so that poem was probably written like maybe 7 years ago. And since then, I'd written another Birds at Night because apparently I didn't feel like that captured everything. That was more abstract, more of just a feeling. And this next one was written several years later, probably, I think last year I wrote this one. And this one's Birds at Night as well. The harass of quiet, wings gathering over the hush of their dark magnified, is midnight, full of loud bodies, the geese lost now, circling 1 a.m. above the trees. My elders say it is a gift to translate these unspeakable things. All I hear is real labor, real pain, in whatever tongue they sing. And the next poem I want to read is it coincides with both of these, and it's just those poems and those moments just elaborated a little bit more. And it's called The Few Times I've Cried. And this ties in with the theme of some of the other poems I have as well that I'll read here in a few minutes. Upon finding a picture of my estranged father holding me and doing CPR on some dude who looks just like my father. So just to give a little context, my father passed away when I was 15. I mean, we know poetry can be it's just like fiction, right? It doesn't have to be real, but some elements are real. And this poem, kind of starts there, but then goes in a different direction. It's called The Few Times I've Cried. Not for my father's funeral. When that friend died at 17, I was laid off from work when we were already bruised. Every job offer was half the pay. I worked 80 hours each week to try to find the way back from fragile. You said we'd be okay. That night, while you were all asleep, I paused at the car door before leaving for work to listen to the geese labor through a no-moon, starred dark. A few clouds dizzied our distance. Their wings coughed out cold sky. I worried about you and the kids, and if the car I stood next to would be repossessed in the parking lot of my work while I posed inside. Walking outside work to see the car gone. The walk home. About feeding our kids. About you leaving. That night, standing outside the car after the birds had gone, we became cloud, then rain, and those birds flying at night the wrong way through winter. So those three kind of tie in together. And then I wanted to read to kind of go on the theme of my father. I died when I was 15. I never really, I mean, he probably came around like maybe once a year. So we really didn't have much of a relationship. And then just a few years ago, I might have been, right before I wrote this poem, my mom sent me a picture on Facebook Messenger of my father holding me, and I look like a baby. And I'm like, and he's smiling, he doesn't have his shirt on, and I'm just like, what is going on in this picture? Because I was born in February, so I'm just like, must have been a nice winter day or something. But this poem's called Upon Finding a Picture of My Estranged Father Holding Me. There I am in the February sun, feeling his gaze. I look only days old. The winter, shadowed behind his shirtless body, cradles me in uncertainty. He shields me from cold. This is what a father feels like. He once held me, wrapped in smile. And so and that's just another short poem. It's funny that some of these poems too, you know, my revision process and my editing process, they start out much longer, but then I end up just, cutting so much out of them. Just what I feel, the things that I feel like I need. This next poem it goes along with that one. It is doing CPR on some dude who looks just like my father. And he has been dead for so many years, I barely recognize him. But for him, I could fake that heart into beating a few more times. Of compressions, I'd breathe for him, press my lips into his, even though it is against protocol. Ribs give under weight, I fall through. 31 shitty, 32 beautiful, reunited minutes, I lose count. In the chaos of the body, I barely knew him anyway. In the ambulance, my hands consent to skin becoming cold, arms practice pushing away. At the hospital, they cannot separate us. So I apologize for the violence of not letting go. This next poem is one that, it's one of those poems that I'd been wanting to, it's something that just I saw in the news about Wolf War 93 came down into California and ended up, they were tracking it, they were doing documentaries on it, and then it ended up getting hit by a car down Southern California somewhere. And so it's just titled Wolf War 93. It was hunger, not the lust I imagined, or the wasted no shame howl you sang. Your legs shattered, on the side of the road a cemetery, a ghost sorrowing through grass in winter. I read about you on the news, wondered how to calculate lonely. What level would you be besides the highest? Not hunger, not love. I'm still measuring the word. So I'm going to read a few. That one was doing CPR on some dude that looks just like my father, of course, was one of those ones that kind of mix the firefighting with the family dynamic. And so I want to get into a few more of the firefighting poems. Let's see here. I remember when I first started writing poetry, like I was just like I did not know what angle to go with some of this firefighting because it's difficult subject matter and it's sometimes difficult to write about, and it's just interesting that eventually it just kind of comes to you, or and then this one is one I wrote this one many years ago, and it was really interesting because this is the first poem that appears in the manuscript, and I had just kind of like, oh, it's one of the earlier poems I'd written, let me just throw it somewhere in the back. And I had several readers graciously read through a lot of my poems and this one just kept coming up as like one of the ones that that they were attracted to. So and it was like one of the last ones that I thought I would have thought. It's called Certain Streets, and the epigraph is so it's certain streets a firefighter will not go. One is marked with flowers. I do not drive down that street or any of the others. They put up pictures and crosses to remind me to look away. Some have nothing because I pave over them in sleep, set up signs, do not enter, closed forever. If I forget or am forced to revisit, I will look ahead, stare at the center line, unfocus my eyes, and make a memory to believe. Tell myself I saved you. This next one, so in the manuscript I have, this is one of the other poems that have the same title. This one's called PTSD. It is 2 a.m. ugly. Beautiful is sleeping, and body parts are now religion. A holy cult where the angels won't shut up about our weeping. All over the road, your chalk outline, limb scattered vessel, a temporary home. I bring it to the station, resurrect you night into night, trace the white scribbled shape into a body. In my room, the ghosts unfold me, caress my uniform before putting it on. And when the angels do not see us, wings undressed, they leave. We are the frowns of your absence, ghosts holding up our clothes. So, let's see. And this one, this is a tough one because not that a lot of them aren't tough, but this one is one of those ones that, like, I had so many other revisions of this one, and I just constantly pared it down until it just, had what I felt it needed. But this is one of those moments where that comes with the job that a lot of people don't think about, because we go on a lot of house fires and the people get out, but then a lot of times there's pets involved. And then, we go in and find the pet. And then there's this kind of haunting moment where, we, of course, volunteer to dig a hole for the pet and bury the pet. So it's kind of, it's just very visceral and surreal, when it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and you're kind of, doing this gesture. But the poem's called Things They Want After Fire, and the epigraph is to the dog I found under a bed. Hands offer compressions to swollen body. Mouth around blackened nose expires. The taste of failure stains the hole dug beside a fence for you. At the station, in my room, I shovel through sleep. Like a bad obituary, plagiarize me better. So just a short little poem, just a glimpse into that aspect of the job. This one is a little bit different tone. This one I wrote several years ago too. It was just one of those moments where I think it was one of those moments where you kind of project yourself or personify yourself into, it's something I probably never could do. And so this is, I think, how I would kind of, not how I would think, but I think it's myself putting myself into someone else's shoes that actually does this. But it's called Donating My Body to a Figure Drawing Class. Cross my legs if you need to gaze unaroused. I thought that's why I was here. Make me thick and animal. Veins on my arms elicited from page. Unblush this face. Take my smile as penance. I could wear a collared shirt or prude me into a tie. Dislocate what you need to loosen me for a beat. Open a hand for dance, then float over this paper like a ghost go through me. So this one's heading us back towards, or the next couple are firefighting poems, or the next three I have here. Let me take a little water break too. So this one kind of goes into the aspect of the job of just the mental preparation. And that's something that a lot of people maybe don't think about. It's just, sometimes we kind of formulate scenarios in our head, like, what if this happened? What if this happened? And this one kind of falls along those lines where, we do a lot of training but sometimes, the training just doesn't prepare you for the actual, what's going to happen. It's called CPR at 2 p.m. I have rehearsed all of this, the physical emotion. I've closed eyes, drowned the room crying. I was the breathless walls, the stress of sirens and engines cussing residents. I was the finger shaking the map and the road to your house trembling. I did not practice the neighborhood scream, the buzzing single-wide fluorescent light. I did not practice a blue doll left alone on the living room floor. I never practiced no one holding you. This next one is a firefighting one also, and it goes into, because a lot of times people always ask me, like, oh, how many cats do you save out of a tree, or what do you do when you're not? So when I was writing the poetry for this manuscript, at least the firefighting ones, which I'm going to get into some of the other poems here coming up too, but I tried to, the things that just stuck with me, and this was, and like it is poetry, so there's some embellishment, but this one's called Feather River Canyon. And it's about a rescue that, car plunged into the river, and we basically had to wait downstream for, to recover people that weren't in it. We were there basically for hours. And it's called Feather River Canyon. Almost threw my rope to water, pretending to be the child. A small shirt waving sleeves was too much body. I am lonely on the shore, waiting hours in rain. The boy shirtless, wherever he is, will return. While the river gossips, then argues with me, a burial, as if agreeing, the high water mark sign nods above our engines. At the station, in my room, I slip into the water, resurrect the hours before his family drove from the road, hours before their recovery. This one is called Half Staff, and this is one of those ones where it's the same thing. Originally, it was, most of my poems, barely touch the bottom of the page or less than that, and then this one it was a pretty long poem, and I ended up just cutting everything out. It's very abstract, and it's just called Half Staff. These flowers underneath winter orphans, still buried lilies, we gather about why you did it. Flag and pole coupled close, we say we cannot understand. And that's the poem. I mean, it's really short, and it's about there was several years in a row where we had firefighters commit suicide, and that were in and that we knew that were pretty close to us. So it was just a difficult time of not understanding but understanding. And I wanted the poem to be not as telling and as abstract as I could make it. It's just not give out too much information. Okay, let's see here. Okay, there we go. So this one's called Cousin Wolf Sings. Her all-night melody blushes like directions for new lovers who are lost. Last night, all she held was a hum that ran away. She now stretches words in our broken-down car, somewhere on Valley View between Orphan Lane and the dead end, about hidden roads and streets of homes for all the abandoned. I study the map when she falls from crescendo. Flashlight held by my teeth, her voice needs both hands to trace. She leads me down paths disappearing into blue lines holding imaginary rivers, blacking in thin creases and folds of contoured lines. She drones about the water. I find the blue again, my hands pressed against the faded shore. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this one, I mean, I don't, I live in California, so it's really interesting about, all my life I grew up going to native clinics, and in the native clinics, uh, there's these on the paperwork, there's these check marks of, whether you're of the tribe from the clinic, and then if you're another California native, but then there's a check mark if you're an out of state, native. And um, since I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, I'm also considered at large because I don't live in Oklahoma. And so this poem kind of talks about that, and then also the fact that it was really interesting. One season when I was working at Cal Fire, one of our captains told us we were all at-will employees, and none of us knew what it meant. So we looked it up when he left, and we were, I made that connection of like, oh, that's interesting because with Cal Fire I'm at will, and then with this Chickasaw Nation I'm at large. And so this poem kind of came of that, and also because of the of the tribal healthcare not being I always wondered if like the priority levels were different or something, or the care was different. I was like, well, man, maybe if I went out to Oklahoma, I'd get different care, but and it's called Why I Never Put Res or Off Res on My Resume, or that I was born on ceremonial land because the shitty out of state off res free healthcare made my body a cavity. Flinch when it hurts, they told me. To California, you are at will. To my Chickasaw at large. To me, an anonymous song. This one, let's see how much time. We're looking pretty good on time, huh? Let's see. This one's called Ceremony. And oh yeah, I got out of order here, but there was one I wanted to read with this one, and I'm just not finding it. But basically, this one I was with uh, my grandmother, and she was she was reading she opened up our tribal literary magazine, and I recognized it because I had a poem in it. And I'm like, there's no way she's gonna read my poem. And I kind of peeked over and I saw, because we had a bunch of family there, and I was just like, she started reading the other poem on the page next to it. And I was like, does she not even see my poem there? Like, I'm like, does she not know I was published in there? And she starts reading the other poem. I mean, granted, she was, 90, like two at the time or something. And she paused and she's like, oh, that's the wrong one. And then she started reading my poem. And I was just like, so I mean, it was just one of those moments where and there was some other stuff going on, but the poem's called Ceremony. Pace the table scratches and ink boredom of my youth. I am responsible for all of it. When I tried to ignore her, I was impossible. There was a word in Chickasaw for you, she said. Chipota Loma, the bastard. I didn't think I existed. The word existed in that other tongue. A wobble in the uneven of oak chair, an auntie stables behind me. Other family lean in too. We posture the pause. She could birth the words for being fatherless to me again, walked away from. My hands clamp the chair, wait to be called something with my wandering stutter I call accent. A name that will stain until her death, or we declare she is her own disaster. This one is called While We Were Quiet. I wanted those hips that rose heavy and waist skinny to bloom. She only swole to a curse, called my body sterile. Doctors promised she was barren. Teach me how to say it, words that numb, how to sedate a space when a mother or child provoke and harass her. Help me gentle the room so I can soften and balance a flood to a silly commotion. Then pretend her back home, messy in our bed, like the labor she wished for. This one is the other PTSD. So I guess I'm going back to a firefighting poem here. But I mean, I guess that's what the manuscript does anyways. It kind of goes back and forth. And um, this one, this was written in the long time ago, kind of like The Birds at Night. So I felt like everything kind of had to have context. And so it has an epigraph, and the epigraph is a firefighter's lamentation. I slowly learned that I can get away with more and more and more as, or I mean, I guess less and less and less as, as I continue to write. PTSD, a firefighter's lamentation. They do not wander off, walk around lost, or even get up from the ground to search for loved ones. There is no floating away into the sky with gilded wings to embrace heaven. Instead, eyes open or closed, they stay here with me. Let's see here. I'm going to read. I have a couple here. Okay, this one's called a very few of the poems in the manuscript. I feel like I was able to. I feel like a long process. I spend so much time with the poems, and put them away, come back to them, and just work on them for a long time. And this was one of the few ones that it was just a moment, and I was at work teaching at the college, and I went right back to the office and basically wrote the poem. And I mean, this is pretty much that same draft. It's called Why I Love Lame Excuses from College Freshmen. I hate it when their dads die. Their moms too, but dads die more, so I relate. Trying to sit through class with your bones not there to support you, you dissolve into the desk, try to disappear. Just tell me your alarm did not wake you. Pull yourself together and forget what day it was, like I did when my dad died. This one is some of the firefighting poems are just kind of short snippets, and I mean this is one of them, and it's really hard to try um, and I'm still struggling it with my fiction as well, where I can actually elaborate more, but trying to capture the uncertainty of the job, and it's something that when I was younger, it was just something that I could really appreciate more, but it's like, I don't know, as you get older, it just seems to not be something I appreciate. But this one's called Witness. And it basically just, I think, somewhat captures you're doing one thing one moment and then, the plans just change. They stand around while I compress her chest violent, watch their naked neighbor out of indecency. There is a lightning fire in Siskiyou County growing. We will probably leave at 3 a.m. to be the fresh crew for the 24-hour shift that becomes 36. This one is called the same word in Chickasaw for wolf and coyote. And this one, I just recently did a workshop in through Tin House, and it was really interesting because one of my peers, their name was Ophi, which is in this poem, and I asked them because I was just like, because they're Choctaw, and I asked them, I go, you know, what does Ophi mean in Choctaw? And it means the same thing in both languages, which I thought was really interesting, and it made me want to kind of investigate further because, of course, Chickasaw and Choctaw are so closely related. But so this poem's called Same Word in Chickasaw for Wolf and Coyote. So my brother Neshoba calls me Ophi, the dog, spirit wrong, half wolf, half coyote, says he would still call me dog if I was all coyote. Even if Mother Neshoba made me full wolf, he said I would be wolf artificial, a stray handful of fur from my neck in his grip. Okay, here's the poem I was looking for earlier. This is the one my grandmother was reading during the ceremony. It's called Blankets and Bones, Chickasaw Migration Story. The pole leans toward a rising sun and another day of walking. The warm glow has yet not topped the trees, and my legs are already tired. Woman with child, and the others too small, so I carry one and our belongings. Blankets and the bones of my mother and son tied to my back hold me together. Our rest is beyond each step in a new home every morning. Oh, so this one is another one of the, I think, abstract ones. There are a few that you don't want to elaborate more, and this one is called Garfish Dance. Spread fingers to mouth, make fangs, shake out shelled rhythms to songs. Hand-tight deer skins become drum. We dizzy on the flesh all summer, dance at it, spin around, wear teeth like hands held around our necks, a protection. Looks like I just have a few more minutes, huh? I think I'm getting pretty, let's see here. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to read. Okay. This one is called As She Falls Apart. I think I have time for just a few more. Cancer sets traps to save feral kittens. She wakes early to wake me. Check them, bring them food. Whispers get up in my ear. It is dark out and I am sleeping, and she is not angel enough yet to lift me from dreams where this ends spectacular. I think I got about just a little bit left, and I think the last two I want to read are Fire Season 2015 and 16. So this first one is Fire Season 2015. Give her everything. I think I will survive. The sun coughs me out on a hillside smoldering. Our account is overdrawn, she texts me. I'm melted and salted through to the back of my shirt. I am not a yellow flower, but a stain on a mountain. It is day 40 straight, and we were on this land last summer. I remember when fan blades were metal and the guard was wide enough to fit a hand through, but you didn't care. And then this is Fire Season 2016. You could be gone all summer while your family forgets. They recognize the paychecks you send. She produces the loops and uncertainty of your signature, measures the worth of your name, then scribbles it. You are calculated in miles away, then in days. She files paperwork and asks what fire is it, so they can find and serve you. You, reduced to participating transient, as they continue to remember you all wrong, not as a flower on a hillside, wanting your mother to find you this way, these miles. And I think that's about time there, huh, Tony?
Yeah, thank you so much
Yeah.
for those wonderful, wonderful words. I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about, there are a lot of ghosts in these poems, and then of course all of the birds. They seem related to me in a way, but I don't know if that's how you feel about them. And so I'm just curious where you think maybe what the role of haunting is and what the role, I get asked all the time about the birds in my book. And so I'm always now wanting to ask other people about the birds in their books. And so yeah, so a little bit about the ghosts and the birds.
I think the ghosts and the birds kind of go together for me because they're both, especially the birds at night, were so elusive. It was in the moment that and I think they go hand in hand too, because just of the job of firefighting. Like every station we go to, people say their station's haunted or whatever, because we end up not just staying at our own stations. and of course, we say our stations are haunted, and everything. So I think it's just the birds too, though. It's like so many of the instances for me and what inspired the birds at night were, that one poem, A Few Times I Cried, like I was literally standing outside, thinking like, man, these terrible decisions I made, and like I felt like I hit rock bottom. And then, it was winter time and there's these geese flying overhead and I could hear them circling around and I'm like, they don't even know where they're going, like I just felt like, a connection with them, but also very ghostly, because I really couldn't see them. I could just hear them. Um, and so I think that's kind of the connection is just the almost the not understanding, maybe, just uh, or a relatability of a sense, because these ghostly figures too, you have somewhat of a relatability of, whether they're there or not, the haunting of them and, the metaphor of them as well too, that especially with the PTSD poems and same thing with the certain streets where it's not like just the call is over and then it's over with. It's the haunting of that, and I think that the ghosts are just the normal metaphor. I think for me to insert there, but it's also a very real thing for it seems like any station we go to, they're like, oh, don't sleep in that room. That's the haunted room. And you're just like, so it's pretty interesting.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I'm wondering too if you could talk a little bit about language. There's a lot about, um, the words for things that everyone knows, the English words, and then there's trying to learn Chickasaw language and what words mean in your language and what maybe grappling with knowing and not knowing sometimes. And I wonder if you could talk about the choices to use some Chickasaw language and what that means. I mean, I hear a lot of us talk about that, but I think it's different for everyone. So I'm just interested in your process of coming to learning the language and also using it in your work.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I think it's just one more layer of, because we struggle enough as it is in poetry with the unseen metaphors kind of. One of the poems I didn't read, Junkie Brother Blues has nothing to do with, my brother being a junkie. It's just a metaphor for something else. And so I think same thing with the language is just one more layer aspect, like you said, to grapple with, because how do you incorporate it when you want to, or what are the best ways of incorporating it? And I think going to a program like Institute of American Indian Arts was it that definitely helped me, because I could see it being used by other Native American authors, so that was very helpful. And I mean, I'm still, as writers, we're always still learning and still progressing and, grappling with those elements. And, with the new poetry I'm writing, you're just like, still unsure, So,
I think we all feel that way all of the time about the things we write until sometimes there's a moment when you don't, right? When you think, oh, yes, this is it. Um, Someone I work with here at Arkansas, poet Davis McCombs, also writes mostly very, very short poems. And he's talked too about the drafts and the winnowing and the cutting. I'm wondering if you find, are there certain things, do you start to detect patterns of what stays and what's cut? Or does it just really vary poem to poem?
I think that's a great question. I think that it just, I think I try to get as much down on the page as first as possible, as many details and almost prose like in a sense. And then I start, I'm a big, I don't know, I think I'm a big fan of trying to get away with as much as possible or cutting as much as possible. And, um, I love abstract. I love, sounds, and I love line breaks, and I love, just playing with the words themselves and trying to, um, take away as much as possible and, whittle it down. And sometimes, of course, after a while, I'm like, okay, I took it too far, And then there's other moments where there was poems like doing CPR on some dude like my father that just slowly grew. And I think my style now is it's becoming a little bit, longer poems. The ones I've written since this manuscript are they're not long poems, but I mean they're pushing a page, so that's long for me. And I think writing fiction has helped that. It's made my brain, consider that other genre and like all those requirements within that genre, and kind of going back and forth is difficult, but it's also, I think, rewarding and beneficial because it helps with the storytelling aspect of poetry and filling in those details that I normally didn't really have to consider. I could be very abstract and cut away as much as possible, whereas now I kind of consider um, you know other readers, so it's definitely changing. So I look back at some of these poems and I'm just like, I don't know how that got published. But I mean, I love the poem, but it's so out of context, that there's just so little there.
Yeah, I do think some of the shortest ones tell stories though. Like I can envision the story of it or the moment of it. And it might not be the actual, right? But you're conjuring
Mhm.
something. You're conjuring story, even in the littlest ones. It looked like there was a question in the chat, Kristen. Is that right? Let me see. Yes. Natalie is asking, is there another poet that has influenced you? If so, who? That's a great question.
Oh man. Yeah. So I think Sherwin Bitsui was, I mean, talk about images. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to work with him for a semester, and it was just like the wealth of knowledge. And I was just trying to absorb as much as I could because it was someone that worked, I admired, and the use of images, so like every semester I just tried to, and then I worked with Joan Kane and Cynthia Cruz. So each semester it was just, my mentors, I couldn't believe the mentors I was able to get and work with. And so it was just, it's almost really hard because you're in that moment and you're just like, okay, what can I learn from them? What can I learn from them? What can I get? What can I get? And so, um, you know, I think those were, the three poets that really taught me a lot as far as poetry goes. And I was able to work with Patricia Smith in a workshop as well. And I think, um, I'm trying to think, I was never able to work with Arthur Z, but his poetry is amazing. And I know, excuse me, I know he was at Institute of American Indian Arts for a while. And that was definitely, someone I would recommend to read, but I just wasn't able to work with them.
Yeah, and I know that Arthur taught Sherwin. And I've heard Sherwin talk about Arthur's poetics and teaching style influencing Sherwin's own. So you're in the lineage, whether you worked with Arthur or not. And Yeah. I respect him and his work so much too. Kurt has a question in the chat too. So many of your poems come out of your life fighting fire. What are you going to do if you quit fighting fire? That's a
Oh man, so a lot of my new poems are all about just, because I don't know, are nature poems. And um, once I discovered all these, nature poem anthologies, and I'm just like, oh, this is what I can write. This is another thing I can go off on. And so, that's pretty much been, the ones I've been writing now. And so, I mean, and so those are limitless, right? I mean, there's so many, and it's funny because it does kind of tie into firefighting because, my love of outdoors has become because of firefighting. I get to go to all these, places that, are private properties that no one, ever gets to go to. And it's just, all over California. And it's just got my appreciation for nature and, just everything, all things living out there that have to survive out there. And so, I've written some, especially with working with Patricia Smith, who works with personification so much. I've been writing a few personification, persona poems, in animal voices, or from that point of view. And just, I'm sure there'll be some more firefighting poems, when something pops up, we'll see. But everything I've been written so far is has some kind of aspect. I mean, there is a firefighting poem I'm writing right now about because we were just on a fire this year, and these people, we were staging at their house to try to protect it, and they just let their horses go. And I was just like, well, why not round your horses up and take them, And so the poem's about that. But it's still about horses. And so, but yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there's a lot of other things. I got a bunch of other ones going on.
It makes sense that nature and fire, that you'd be thinking about that. I mean, I think we're all thinking about water, having too much of it or not having enough of it. And so that kind of tension makes a lot of sense right now, for sure. Anyone else? Oh, Kate. Kate's saying thank you. And it's okay. And she's also saying, like I said, there is much haunting in your work, or what I might think of as writing in the aftermath. And so many of your encounters with place in the moment of fire would be so damaging and harsh. But then you hit those moments of place that turn to place, to birds, to sky, to flowers on the mountain. Would you mind reflecting further on how you think about bringing those moments of place-based connection or beauty into the hard encounters of your work?
Yes, there's just so many moments. Like the other day, this is just an example when there's so much destruction going on, but then you find something, beautiful within it, or something that is, kind of can focus you out of it. And I mean, this probably happens in a lot of places, but we have our apparatus bay where we keep the engines, and hummingbirds come in because our fire engines are red, and apparently hummingbirds like red. And so then they come into our app bay and get stuck in there. And so over time, like, I've figured out that if I turn off all the lights, they follow my flashlight, and I can lead them up to the upstairs, and then I use a Tupperware cup, and then I rescue them, and then I take them out. And so, whether other firefighters are, big into nature or not, like, they'll come get me. They're like, I'd be another hummingbird stuck in the at bay, and like, can you show us what you do again? So then I just think, moments like that are just things that, I pay attention to. Or like there'll be a hummingbird hawk moth, flying around, and they're like, oh, gross, what is that? I'm like, no, it's this, So I just think I'm, you know, just all of I think I just noticed those things out in nature and just have a little bit, not necessarily more of an appreciation. It's just, maybe it's just a good distraction for me too. Like you mentioned, it's a contrast, that, just really stands out to me. And um, I think if it's something that gets my attention, I think it's something that I feel worth putting into the poems. And I think, the readers will maybe connect with it too. So many times I'm always having my phone out with my notes, and I'm always putting in whether I don't know what's going to end up happening to it or where it's going to go, but I'm always in my notes on my phone, entering in little snippets here and there. Or as everyone's heard Pam Houston say, the glimmers, these little things.
That's a beautiful answer. I think it's good. Are we at time, Kristen? It's beautiful to
We
have you.
are. We
Okay.
are. But if you have another one and you want to go for it, go.
No, I'm good. I really don't think you can do much better than any on hummingbirds. So
Yeah,
thank you.
great. I want to thank Ivy and Tony so much. This was a lovely reading and a lovely discussion, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thank you guys so much for coming. Look out for Ivy's book. It should be out next spring, right? So yay.
I think it's up for pre-order right now through
It
Texas
is.
Tech.
I put the link in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a good night.